video evidence from 3 of those incidences. 2 of the incidents have no video. We're doing so under the current officer-involved shooting video evidence release protocol signed by the Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association. Law enforcement is prioritizing OIS investigations and reviews given the public's heightened interest in these incidences. A warning: any broadcast outlets that may be live streaming this news conference are advised that these videos contain graphic, violent content that is not appropriate for a general audience, including children. Once the briefing is over, copies of the letters we provided to law enforcement agencies and copies of the videos will be made available. As is common in these scenarios, every one of the individuals involved in the shootings being discussed today was impaired by drugs, alcohol, or both at the same time. Before we begin, a few reminders. This video evidence is exempt under the California Public Records Act. Our decision to release it does not otherwise waive that privilege. We do not plan to release any additional evidence from the investigatory materials at this time and continue to claim the privileges we are entitled to under the law. The media has a responsibility to decide which portions of the video are ultimately broadcast and posted online, and to respect the impact that broadcasting of the video has on family members. They also have a duty to put these videos into context, because presented out of context, a video clip can lead to incorrect and sometimes inflammatory narratives about an incident. With context, video evidence can aid the public in understanding why and how an officer-involved shooting occurred and build public trust in law enforcement. Pursuant to the release policy, we only release video that is relevant to our legal analysis of the shooting. In other words, the videos that show what happened in the moments before or leading up to the shooting will be shown. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today. Faces of the individuals are blurred out of respect for their privacy. In general, the video will stop once the individual who is shot is no longer an immediate threat and no more shots are being fired. The purpose of the District Attorney's review of officer-involved shootings is to determine whether or not criminal charges should be filed. In other words, was a crime committed? We review all the evidence to determine what the facts are and what we can prove with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. We evaluate the evidence, including the physical evidence, witness statements, laboratory analysis, medical evidence, or other sources of information. We do not review issues regarding department policies, training, discipline, the appropriate use or non-use of less than lethal force options, or whether there may be civil liability. Under California law, peace officers may use deadly force to protect themselves from the threat of death or great bodily harm. Just as with other citizens, the law of self-defense and the defense of others is available to peace officers. Under the law, an officer's use of deadly force is reasonable if the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or to others. Officers have additional rights because of the nature of their job. Peace officers may use deadly force in the course of their duties under circumstances that are not available to members of the general public. The first incident is the non-fatal shooting of Alejandro Blanco. Mr. Blanco got into a physical altercation with 2 other men at a 7-Eleven store in Vista. 4 off-duty San Diego sheriff deputies were across the parking lot and saw the confrontation. The deputies verbally identified themselves as sheriff deputies and approached the group. As the deputies contacted him, Mr. Blanco reversed his car, striking 2 of the deputies, knocking them to the ground. Mr. Blanco then pulled forward and struck a third deputy with the car. He then accelerated through the parking lot toward one of the deputies who had already been hit by the car, but had managed to stand up. That deputy landed on the hood and windshield of the car. Mr. Blanco continued accelerating through the parking lot. Fearing for his safety, the deputy on the hood fired through the windshield of the car, striking Mr. Blanco. Mr. Blanco sustained injuries to his right hand and forehead. He was transported to local hospital with non-life-threatening gunshot wounds. One deputy was airlifted to the hospital and survived his injuries. Another deputy was also transported to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. A blood sample showed Mr. Blanco's blood alcohol content was 0.05. Mr. Blanco pled guilty to assault with a deadly weapon, with the personal use of a deadly weapon, and to 2 counts of assault by means of force likely to produce great bodily injury. He's scheduled to be sentenced next week. There is surveillance video of this incident from the 7-Eleven that is poor quality and does not have audio, but will be shown. The next incident is the non-fatal shooting of James Griggs Fritz. In March of 2015, members of the San Diego Regional Fugitive Task Force were in an apartment complex in Alpine conducting surveillance on a vehicle registered to a girlfriend of Mr. Griggs Fritz. Mr. Griggs Fritz had an outstanding felony warrant for reckless evading and was wanted for questioning by the San Diego Police Department. Earlier in the day, a California Highway Patrol officer assigned to the task force attended a briefing where he learned the fugitive may be armed with a firearm, and he had vowed to, quote, shoot it out with the police rather than been taken into custody. After Mr. Griggs Fritz was located and the surveillance team approached to arrest him, United States Marshals drove up behind Mr. Griggs Fritz's vehicle, a lifted Ford Excursion SUV, in an attempt to pin the vehicle in and prevent him from fleeing. Due to the positioning of the unmarked police vehicle, 2 marshals were directly behind the rear of the Excursion when they exited their car. Despite the officer's orders for Mr. Griggs Fritz to shut off the car, he instead started the vehicle and the Excursion began rocking back and forth. Fearing that he was going to crush them with the car, a U.S. Marshal fired at Mr. Griggs Fritz. 2 other federal agents at the scene saw Mr. Griggs Fritz was in position to back into the 2 marshals. Those 2 agents also fired their weapons at Mr. Griggs Fritz. As this was occurring, a CHP officer ran to the corner of the building nearest Mr. Griggs Fritz's location. As the CHP officer rounded the corner, he heard the gunshots and saw glass breaking on the driver's side of Mr. Griggs Fritz's SUV. Believing he was being shot at by Mr. Griggs Fritz, the CHP officer dropped to one knee and fired. Mr. Griggs Fritz was struck multiple times by bullets fired by the various law enforcement officers. He was transported by paramedics to the hospital where he was treated, released, and booked into San Diego County Jail. He pled guilty to transportation of controlled substances, possession for sale of a controlled substance, resisting an executive officer, evading an officer with reckless driving, unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor under 16, assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, and assault with a deadly weapon. He's scheduled to be sentenced on May 26th. A toxicology report shows Mr. Griggs Fritz had amphetamine and methamphetamine in his system at the time of the incident. The CHP officer is the only law enforcement officer whose actions are subject to the district attorney's review in this incident. The 3 fugitive task force members who fired their weapons are federal law enforcement officers and are not subjects of this review, pursuant to the countywide protocol on officer-involved shootings. Based on the totality of the circumstances, the CHP officer had a reasonable belief he needed to defend himself and the other law enforcement agents present. Therefore, he bears no criminal liability for his actions. There's no video in this incident since neither the federal agents nor the CHP were outfitted with body-worn camera. The next incident is the non-fatal shooting of Mr. Jose Armando Garcia. On July 7th of last year, Mr. Garcia, his daughter, called 911, stating her father was high on methamphetamine, was acting violent, had a handgun and a rifle, and was threatening to commit suicide by having a police officer kill him. San Diego County Sheriff's Department deputies responded and learned Garcia was, in fact, armed with a handgun and was threatening suicide in front of his wife and 3 young children. Deputies set up a perimeter around Mr. Garcia's residence, and for the next 5 hours, crisis negotiators tried to convince Mr. Garcia to surrender peacefully. The standoff ended when Mr. Garcia walked into the street, pulled a handgun from his pocket, and fired 3 rounds while waving the raised gun indiscriminately. 2 sheriff's deputies each fired 1 round, striking Mr. Garcia. He was transported to the hospital where he was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Our review determined that Mr. Garcia pointed and fired his handgun in the presence of multiple sheriff's deputies, which caused the deputies to fear for their safety. The deputies reasonably believed Mr. Garcia was going to shoot them, and they needed to act immediately to avoid being killed or seriously injured. Based on these facts, the evidence, and the law, the sheriff's deputies bear no criminal liability for their actions. The deputies were not equipped with body-worn cameras, and no video exists of this incident. A toxicology report showed Mr. Garcia had amphetamines and benzodiazepines in his system at the time of the incident. A blood sample revealed he had a 0.04% blood alcohol. Mr. Garcia pled guilty to making a criminal threat with a personal use of a firearm and assault with a firearm upon a peace officer. On March 7th of this year, he received a 6-year prison term. The next incident is the non-fatal shooting of Ferdinand Alessio. Mr. Alessio had a dispute with 2 men who believed he owed them money. Several witnesses called 911 after they saw Mr. Alessio point a handgun at the men while walking along Ulrich Street. Some witnesses believed he fired the gun at them. A San Diego PD officer located Alessio and the men. One of the men was across the street and walked away from the scene. The other ordered Mr. Alessio and the other man to lie down on the sidewalk. Mr. Alessio knelt down, but he would not lie down as required. Instead, he got up, pointed the gun at the officer, and then attempted to flee. The officer believed Mr. Alessio had shot at him and jumped behind the patrol car for cover, injuring his hand and tearing his uniform in the process. Mr. Alessio ran across the street towards a daycare center where nearly 70 young children were being cared for. The officer, aware that the business was a daycare center, ran after Mr. Alessio, shouting at him to stop and get down on the ground. A second San Diego police officer arrived at the scene and also ran after Mr. Alessio. Still carrying the gun, Mr. Alessio tried to enter the daycare center through a door, but was unable to open it. He then started to climb over the fence in the daycare center. The officer saw Mr. Alessio point the gun in his direction. Both officers fired at Mr. Alessio, who was shot in the hand, causing him to drop his gun before falling into the hallway of the daycare center. A toxicology report showed he had methamphetamine in his system at the time. Last month, Mr. Alessio pled guilty to obstructing or resisting an officer in the performance of their duties by means of threat, use of a dangerous weapon, and weapons allegations. He was sentenced to 2 years, 4 months in state prison. The gun Alessio was carrying was a dark metal air-powered BB pistol. Our review determined the officer's use of deadly force was expected and reasonable under the circumstances. Mr. Alessio intentionally pointed a BB gun, which looked very similar to a handgun, at a person. Mr. Alessio then pointed the same gun at the officer on 2 different occasions. His decision to try to get into a daycare facility while still armed with the gun, failing to follow the officer's directions, and attempting to escape, left the officers little choice but to act quickly and stop the threat they reasonably believed he presented. Therefore, neither officers bears any criminal liability for their actions based on the facts, the evidence, and the law. There are 2 body-worn camera videos of the incident, as well as 2 surveillance camera videos. We'll roll them now.
Lay down. Hey. Stop. Put your hands down. Get on the ground. Get on the stomach. Get on your stomach. Get on your stomach right now, okay? Get on the stomach right now. Keep that way. Keep that way. Keep your hands down. Keep that way. Stop. Keep shooting over. Okay. Keep shooting. Move. Keep shooting. Come on.
57 John, I got 2 males coming right now. I got another male across the street. He's walking away, possibly related. He's in front of 2100 already.
Hey, don't move from me, man, all right? Shoot that way. Stop. Don't move. Don't stop. 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 Put your hand up. Oh. Hey, he's got a gun. He's got a gun. He's got a gun. He's running away right now. I'm in pursuit. Hey, pick him on his fence. 67 John's running through the child care center. Move! Don't move! Don't move! Don't move!
The final incident is the non-fatal shooting of Danny Martin Baldwin on January 1st of this year. Mr. Baldwin placed 7 911 calls from his cell phone over the course of about 30 minutes. During the calls, he demanded that his girlfriend be brought to him and claimed he was going to, quote, take himself out in front of her. Eventually, a total of 4 El Cajon police officers responded to the area. Officers found Mr. Baldwin in the center median of 2nd Street holding a knife. Officers approached Mr. Baldwin cautiously, calmly trying to offer help and de-escalate the situation. Officers told Mr. Baldwin to drop the knife, but he refused. Mr. Baldwin walked backwards into the roadway and onto the center median as officers tried to reason with him. There were open businesses as well as vehicle and pedestrian traffic in the area at the time. Mr. Baldwin continued to ramble about his dog and trouble with his girlfriend. Mr. Baldwin told the officers 3 times, quote, I'm going to kill myself no matter what. At one point, Mr. Baldwin started running away from the officers toward an intersection. He then abruptly turned around and squared off with his knife displayed. 2 officers fired their tasers at Mr. Baldwin, but neither was effective in incapacitating him. During the second taser deployment, Mr. Baldwin went down to his knees in the street. He placed the knife to his neck and made 2 slashing motions along his neck and throat area. One of the officers, who initially fired the taser, then fired his handgun at Baldwin, striking him in the arms and the buttocks. Mr. Baldwin was transported to the hospital. Mr. Baldwin survived his injuries and later apologized to officers for putting them in this situation. During an interview with the investigators, Mr. Baldwin said he was trying to get officers to shoot him. He had a note written to his girlfriend in his pocket that said, quote, it had to come down to death by police. A hospital toxicology report revealed Mr. Baldwin had amphetamine in his system at the time. Our review of this incident shows that after verbal engagement was ineffective, officers took appropriate steps to avoid the use of deadly force. 2 separate taser deployments did not incapacitate Mr. Baldwin. At the moment shots were fired, all 4 police officers were within a short distance from Mr. Baldwin and his knife. As required by law, our review must consider the totality of the circumstances, including the officers' perceptions of the rapidly unfolding events. Based on the potential danger to the officers and the bystanders by Mr. Baldwin's erratic behavior while armed with a knife and refusing to surrender, the officers' actions were reasonable under the circumstances, and no further action will be taken by the district attorney at this time. There are 2 body-worn camera videos that captured this incident.
Hey, buddy? Hey, what's your name, boss? Danny? Hey, my name's Andrew. Why don't you tell me what's going on tonight, man? Your old lady won't give you your dog. We can help you with that, but you got to put the knife down for us to... Huh? Okay, that's fine. How can we help you? You tell us, how can we help you? Hey, you gotta tell me, well, how can we help you? We're just trying to help, man. Take a seat on the curb. Grab a seat. Grab a seat on the curb. Yeah, we just want to help you out, man. You got taser. Hey, hey, hey! Put the knife down! 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 Ineffective! Put the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get the knife, boy. Stop. Blue gun. You got a canine around? Do it. Do it. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
At the conclusion of this briefing, you can pick up a flash drive at the back of the room which contains the videos we screened today, as well as copies of the letters that were delivered to law enforcement. I encourage all media outlets that choose to post these videos to also post the accompanying letters so that the public can view them with the appropriate context. I'll open it up now to questions.
In the last incident, where was the person shot? Where was he hit? Can you give us that information?
I think in the hand, I'm not sure if I gave it to you.
Leg in the butt? No, I think it's in the letter.
Yeah, it's definitely, more detail is in the letter. Obviously, we try to compress it for this purposes.
Bonnie, did you say, I heard it on the last four, but in the very first one, whether the reason those officers were cleared, the off-duty officers, deputies?
Yes.
Can I ask you, did you guys administer a sobriety test to that deputy who fired the weapon? in the
I
first-
don't believe, well, we wouldn't do it anyway. It
Oh,
would,
I'm sorry, yes, that's correct.
that
You
would be
know-
the sheriff's department, and I'm not aware that that was done. That would be a police procedure and practice that you'd have to inquire of El Cajon Police Department. I'm sorry, Sheriff's Department.
Would that have been something, though, that you would have wanted to know in that investigation of whether that officer, deputy was under the influence?
No, I think looking at the circumstances of the crime, it's clear that they were acting appropriately at the time.
And following up on the last one, I know that you gave the briefing before, and then we saw the video, and the video is always so much more powerful than sometimes
Than words.
The words, they really are. And it appeared at the end as if he was, when he pulled the knife out, he was going to commit suicide or something. Can you pick up the facts and what you've detailed from that point on, right before the officer fired the weapon?
Well, he was on the ground making the slashing movements, and the officers were very close to him, all three officers. And having deployed, first of all, trying to calm him down, trying to get him to stop, trying to de-escalate, and then having used the tasers, because you saw how populated that area was, the officers felt that under the circumstances they needed to fire.
And, sorry, can you explain why these 5 were grouped together with this? I would imagine within the same time periods there have been other shootings. How do you kind of decide which ones are presented together in this kind of form?
We're trying to prioritize them, and as you can tell, most of them had criminal charges attached. And as you could hear, most of them ended relatively lately in the process. So as they come in from law enforcement, we begin our process. And then once we begin our process, if there are criminal charges pending, that holds up, the release of these. So we put all the ones that we had together, and I think we're pretty close to up to date on the ones that we have. So we're trying very hard to get them out as soon as we can. So there's no special looking at why they were released at the time. It was just as they come in and as the cases are taken care of.
And I'm curious, just within this release protocol of the video, having been in this position for quite some time, what are the benefits to going through this process now more than you knew from before, and if there are any drawbacks in your opinion?
Well, I think the benefits are, having an open, transparent procedure, also expediting the process. As you can see from when the incidents occurred and when we've now released them, I think all of them you'll find are within the agency's 90 days and within our review within 90 days, which is very quickly done. So I think we have prioritized them. We have shown the video to see the benefit, although I think we've also learned that the benefit of the video isn't always helpful because of the type of video. Sometimes it's moving in motion, sometimes it's the dashboard or those kinds of things. But I think it is helpful to illuminate what's happening, and particularly when it's from different angles. I think that's helpful too, because looking just straight from the officer's dash cam is only one view, and seeing it from different views too. But I also think it shows the public how officers are, in situations where they have to make split-second decisions often, and there are a lot of things going on at the same time, and they have to look out for the safety of the community, the safety of other officers, and for themselves as well. So I think it highlights, and especially this week in particular with the active shooter case that we see that things just unfold very quickly. And it's important that the public, I think, understand that as well.
I have a question regarding the placement of the video. There were portions there where the officers would grab their walkie to talk. Is that a concern for you guys? I mean, it could potentially in the future block an important part of the shooting or whatever's happening.
Well, the placement of the cameras are up to the police departments, and I'm not sure what that protocol may be, so that would be something to reach out to the agencies. And as you know, body cameras are evolving too, so that's a good thing. As the technology increases, I think they'll become better and better and easier to place. Okay, thank you very much.
Mariana has flash drives in the back of the room. flash drives now are encrypting our flash drives, and so you need a code to unlock them. So she's also giving you a piece of paper that has that code on it.
What does that mean?
Just for a baseline, and we had 5.
I think it's,
20-year report.
yeah, I think the average was between 14 and 18, I think, something.
14 and 18.
Yeah. The 20-year report, though, does break it down, I think, yeah. I think you're safe if you're in between there.